The first splash of soda hit the pavement before anyone realized what was happening. Dark liquid spreading like a bruise at the feet of an elderly woman who stood frozen in line outside a small neighborhood grocery store. She was thin, her back slightly bent by years of carrying more than groceries, years of loss, patience, and quiet endurance. Her hands trembled as she held a few coins, counting them carefully, while a small puppy peeked out from her worn cardigan, its tail wagging despite the chill in the air. Laughter cut through the afternoon like broken glass. A young man stepped forward, expensive shoes gleaming, confidence spilling from him as easily as the soda can he still held. He was known in the city, not for kindness or effort, but for his last name. The son of a billionaire, raised behind gates and guards, untouched by consequences. He smirked as he looked down at the woman and her puppy, as if they were an inconvenience in his perfect day. "Move faster," he said loudly, so everyone could hear. "Some of us have places to be." The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were kind, but tired, the kind of eyes that had seen joy and heartbreak in equal measure. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just need a moment." The young man rolled his eyes. "A moment? You people always need a moment." Before anyone could stop him, he flicked the soda can in his hand. The remaining drink splashed across her coat and the puppy's fur. The puppy yelped softly and pressed closer to her chest. The street went silent. The woman didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply reached into her bag, pulled out a handkerchief, and began gently wiping the puppy, murmuring soft reassurances. Her silence somehow felt heavier than any scream. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered that it was wrong. But no one stepped forward. The young man laughed again. "Relax, it's just soda," he said, as if that excused everything. The woman finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Young man," she said, "life has a way of teaching lessons when we least expect them." He scoffed. "Sure it does." She paid for her small loaf of bread and can of soup, thanked the cashier, and turned to leave, soda stains still darkening her coat. As she walked away, her steps slow but steady. Something about her dignity lingered in the air. What no one knew, not the laughing young man, not the silent crowd, was that the woman's name was Margaret Hale. She had been a nurse once, a wife, a mother, and years ago, when the flag had been folded and placed into her shaking hands, she had become a widow. Her husband had served his country until the end, and her son had followed the same path, choosing duty over comfort, service over safety. Margaret walked a few blocks before stopping on a bench beneath a leafless tree. She cleaned her puppy, Buddy, carefully, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. We're okay." Buddy licked her fingers, trusting her completely. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old phone. Her hands hesitated before dialing a number she rarely used, not because she didn't love her son, but because she never wanted to worry him. The call connected. "Mom?" came a voice, calm but alert. "Everything okay?" Margaret smiled softly, even though he couldn't see it. "I'm fine, Daniel. I wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. Daniel Hale had spent years learning to read silence, to hear what wasn't being said. "Mom," he said gently, "what happened?" She sighed. "Nothing that matters. Just a reminder that the world can be unkind." "Where are you?" "At the bench near Maple Street." "I'm on my way," he said, his voice steady but unmistakably firm. Margaret tried to protest, but the line had already gone quiet. 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up nearby. A tall man stepped out, his presence commanding without being loud. His hair was cropped short, his posture disciplined. He wore plain clothes, but there was no mistaking the confidence of someone who had faced chaos and survived it. Daniel scanned the street until he saw his mother. His face softened instantly. He crossed the distance quickly and knelt in front of her. "Mom," he said, taking her hands. "What happened?" She looked at him, at the familiar strength in his eyes, and finally allowed herself a small crack in her composure. "A young man was having a bad day," she said simply. Daniel noticed the stains on her coat. His jaw tightened, but he took a breath, grounding himself. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. "My pride, maybe, but that will heal." He smiled faintly. "Always stronger than you think." They sat together for a moment. Buddy climbed into Daniel's lap, tail wagging furiously. "I raised you better than to let anger decide your actions," Margaret said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. Daniel nodded. "You raised me to stand up for what's right." Across the street, the billionaire's son exited the store, still laughing with a friend. He stopped when he saw the scene. The elderly woman, the puppy, and the man standing beside her now. Something about Daniel's calm, focused gaze made the young man uneasy. Daniel stood and walked toward him, not fast, not slow, just steady. "You," Daniel said, his voice level, "you threw soda at my mother." The young man scoffed, but there was less confidence this time. "So what if I did?" It was a joke. Daniel didn't raise his voice. "You humiliated her, in public, for no reason." "Relax," the young man said. "Do you know who my father is?" Daniel nodded once. "Do you know who my mother is?" The question caught him off guard. "She's a widow," Daniel continued. "She spent her life caring for others. She raised me alone after my father died serving this country. She doesn't deserve cruelty." A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the tension. Phones were raised, whispers spreading. The young man shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean anything by it." Daniel took a step closer. "Intent doesn't erase impact." For a moment, it seemed like the situation might explode. But then Margaret's voice carried across the street, calm and clear. "Daniel," she called, "come back." He turned immediately. She stood, walking toward them, Buddy trotting at her side. She faced the young man, looking up at him with eyes that held no hatred. "Young man," she said, "I forgive you." The word landed harder than anger ever could. The crowd fell silent. The young man blinked. "You, what?" "I forgive you," she repeated. "Not because what you did was right, but because holding on to bitterness only makes the world heavier." Something shifted in his expression. The performance, the arrogance, it cracked. Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out the handkerchief. She handed it to him. "You spilled something," she said gently. "You might want to clean yourself up." His face flushed. He took the handkerchief with shaking hands. "I'm sorry," he said, the words sounding unfamiliar, like a language he'd never practiced. "I really am." Daniel watched, his eyes steady, proud of his mother in a way words couldn't express. The young man looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes on him, not judging, but waiting. "I'll pay for your groceries," he blurted out, and anything else you need." Margaret smiled. "What I need," she said, "is for you to remember this moment. Use your privilege to lift others, not push them down." He nodded. swallowing hard. Later that evening, Margaret and Daniel walked home together. The sky burned orange and pink, the day softening as it ended. "You didn't have to come," she said. Daniel smiled. "I always will." At home, as Margaret made tea, Daniel watched her move around the kitchen, resilient and gentle, a quiet force of goodness in a loud world. That night, the video spread online. But what people talked about wasn't the soda or the confrontation, it was the forgiveness, the dignity, the reminder that true strength isn't found in wealth or power, but in compassion. And somewhere in the city, a young man lay awake, replaying the moment an elderly widow chose kindness over anger, and realizing, for the first time, that humanity is the greatest inheritance anyone can receive.